On August 12th, Zhu Rongji passed away. Voice of America reported on a secret anecdote about Zhu Rongji, recounted by Kenneth Lieberthal, a special assistant to the former US president, in which he and Zhu Rongji discussed changing the party's name. In order for China to join the WTO, Zhu Rongji wanted to win the trust of the United States and made various efforts to try to do so. Today, Xi Jinping faces the same dilemma. How to regain the trust of the United States has become a question that the CCP leader is racking his brains to solve. Right now, a massive power earthquake is unfolding within the CCP, with rumors circulating that the Red Second Generation and Military Second Generation are banding together and have issued an ultimatum to Xi Jinping for August 30th. At the same time, the US Embassy in China has repeatedly issued travel advisories for China, pointing directly to the potential for social unrest. Hello everyone, this is Weiyu Looks at the World, and I am Chen Weiyu. The CCP leader knows that only by winning the trust of the United States can they avoid being beaten and get some rewards. Deng Xiaoping once famously said, "All countries that have maintained good relations with the United States have become prosperous." However, successive CCP leaders have all been calculating and scheming to deceive the United States into trusting them. Back then, in order to win the trust of the United States, Zhu Rongji even had a secret conversation on a sofa that was exposed by Voice of America. In April 1999, then Premier of the State Council of the CCP, Zhu Rongji, embarked on a visit to the United States. At that time, China-US relations were ostensibly heating up over China's accession to the WTO, but behind the scenes, there were undercurrents and heavy precautions. Kenneth Lieberthal, who served as Special Assistant to the President for National Security Affairs and Senior Director for Asian Affairs at the National Security Council from 1998 to 2000, participated in that visit by Zhu Rongji and had direct contact with him. Li Kenru is his Chinese name. He is a well-known American expert on China, and before retiring, he served as a professor of political science at the University of Michigan and director of the John L. Thornton China Center at the Brookings Institution. He is one of the American scholars who advocates for engagement with China. In an exclusive interview with Voice of America in January 2023, Kenneth Lieberthal discussed his impressions of Zhu Rongji, particularly regarding his unsuccessful visit to the United States in April 1999. Lieberthal believes that Zhu Rongji was one of the few leaders in the Chinese Communist Party who understood how to deal with the West. He was humorous, candid, and able to assess the situation accurately, playing the most critical role in pushing forward the negotiations for China's accession to the WTO. However, that visit was not successful. A few months later, Kenneth Lieberthal accompanied then U.S. Treasury Secretary Larry Summers to China to resume the WTO accession negotiations with China. In Taiwan, Shanxi, during a break in the itinerary, Zhu Rongji pulled Kenneth Lieberthal aside, and the two sat on a sofa for a secret conversation. Zhu Rongji looked at Lieberthal and, with great candor and even a hint of anxiety, asked him a question. "Mr. Lieberthal, what exactly is needed to make the United States truly trust China? My feeling is that we have reached a point where we can deal with each other, and we could do even more. But why is there always a lack of fundamental mutual trust between us?" This question, one could say, hits the core pain point of China-US relations. Lieberthal looked at Zhu Rongji and answered very candidly, "Mr. Premier, I will be very frank. I grew up in the United States during the Cold War, and in our value system, Americans can never truly trust a communist leadership." Then, Lieberthal proposed a suggestion that sounded shocking at the time. He said, "In my view, the Communist Party of China has actually changed a lot. If you were to change your name, for instance, to the Chinese Social Democratic Labor Party or something else, it would still remain faithful to what you want to achieve. But if you were to change that name, it would be a huge help in eliminating the trust crisis between the US and China." After hearing this, Zhu Rongji looked at Lieberthal, smiled, and said, "That is a very interesting idea. But of course, we cannot do that, because the Communist Party of China is our brand, and we cannot change our brand." This conversation was later recorded by Lieberthal. Zhu Rongji's response not only displayed his wit and humor as a technocrat, but also ruthlessly exposed his ultimate limitations as an official within the system. In Zhu Rongji's view, the three words Communist Party were merely a commercial symbol, a signboard, a brand. He believed that as long as China opened its doors to do business, boosted the economy, and let Western capital come in to make money, the United States would accept China. But he failed to realize that in the eyes of the Western free world, behind the three words Communist Party lies authoritarianism, the trampling of human rights, and a betrayal of universal values. This is not a PR issue that can be solved by simply changing a trademark. It is a fundamental opposition concerning systems and moral bottom lines. That question left behind by Zhu Rongji back then, how on earth can China make the United States trust it? It has been hovering like a ghost over the red walls of Zhongnanhai for more than 20 years. Even today, Xi Jinping is also urgently trying to figure out this question. But US-China relations today are long past the state of the Zhu Rongji era, where there was some squabbling, but they could still sit down and talk business. Today, the United States doesn't just lack trust in the CCP, it is a state of complete distrust. So is this complete distrust solely because the CCP hasn't changed its name? Feel free to share your thoughts. In fact, it's not just China that hasn't earned the United States' trust. Canada hasn't either, which has taught the world a brutal lesson in geopolitics. At this point, some friends might say that the US doesn't trust the CCP because it's an authoritarian regime. If it were a Western democratic ally, then the US could trust it unconditionally. That's not necessarily true. Let's take a look at America's neighbor, its blood-related ally to the north, Canada. Recently, a farce unfolded in Canadian politics that left the whole world stunned. Previously, the Liberal government led by Prime Minister Carney, in an effort to show toughness toward the US, high-profile launched a so-called Resist America, Aid Canada nationwide anti-American campaign, calling on Canadian citizens to boycott American goods with great momentum. As it turned out, when Washington threw a heavy punch and issued an ultimatum of a 50% punitive tariff, the Carney government completely caved overnight, offering up a provisional agreement that was practically a unilateral surrender of territory and payment of reparations. The Globe and Mail exclusively revealed this provisional US-Canada agreement, which unilaterally revokes retaliatory tariffs, cancels the previously imposed counter-tariffs on American automobiles and other goods, opens the market with open arms, welcomes American liquor with open arms, lifts the delisting orders from major provincial liquor stores, and allows American liquor to return to Canada. Shattering buy local protection commitments, abandoning government procurement protection policies, opening the doors of infrastructure directly to US companies, redistributing the dairy market, using the interests of our own Canadian dairy farmers as a stepping stone, allocating quotas according to Washington's intentions, abandoning the digital services tax, and even sharing the toll revenue from the Gordie Howe International Bridge, which Canada funded itself, with the US. After all that trouble, Canada not only failed to get reciprocal tax cuts from the US, but instead ended up with skyrocketing prices and persistently high inflation in its own economy, leaving the people in misery. What's even more ironic is that politicians like Carney, while shouting anti-American slogans, privately keep all their assets, funds, and stocks in American banks and have even moved their companies to the US in advance, becoming full-fledged naked officials. Seeing this, you might ask, since Canada has already knelt down so completely, is the US satisfied? Has the US given Canada unconditional trust? It has not. Canada knelt down and offered this grand gift, but it didn't get reciprocal tax cuts from the US in return. So some might ask, why is Trump making things so difficult for Canada? This is the core issue I want to deeply analyze with you all today. The Carney administration simply doesn't understand what the US is most wary of today. What exactly is the US most wary of today? Feel free to share your answers in the comments section. I'll share my answer with you in detail a bit later. First, let's take a quick commercial break. Thanks to our show sponsor, the Korean Jeju Island Red Sea Cucumber Health Gel. This Red Sea Cucumber Health Gel is one of our most popular products right now, and it often sells out. Why is it so often in such high demand? First, it's harvested by hand by the Hanyo divers of Jeju Island, and the yield of wild Red Sea cucumbers is naturally very limited. Second, the repurchase rate is really high. Many viewers have their whole family taking it. If you often feel tired, don't sleep well, or lack energy, that's often a sign of long-term physical depletion. Red sea cucumbers are rich in sea cucumber saponins, sea cucumber polysaccharides, and collagen, which can help our bodies slowly restore vitality. There was a female viewer in her 50s who had pain in about 11 joints throughout her body due to menopause. After taking a red sea cucumber health supplement, the pain was significantly reduced after a few months. I also have a friend who suffered from chronic mouth ulcers, and after taking it a few times, she got better. A few days ago, another viewer told us in the comments section that she started taking it in June and felt great. The pressure on her knees was relieved and she could move freely. She said she would definitely continue taking it long term. Of course, these are individual experiences, and results may vary from person to person. I want to remind everyone that Red Sea Cucumber Health Gel is a high-quality health supplement, not a substitute for medicine. If you need it, you should really give it a try. Click the link below our video and enter my promo code WAYU to enjoy a 15% discount. There is currently a 1-year anniversary appreciation sale going on. You can check the comment section for more details. Carney thought that by making unilateral concessions on commercial ledgers like tariffs, alcohol, and dairy products, he could appease America's anger. But he completely misread the situation. The deepest fear and anger of the United States today is not about how much business you've taken from them or how many hundreds of millions in taxes you've underpaid, but rather whether Canada is closing the CCP's strategic backdoor behind North America's security perimeter. In the current U.S. global strategic deployment, containing the threat from the CCP is actually the top priority national security bottom line. The United States and Canada share the longest undefended border in the world and possess a highly integrated air defense system. In the eyes of the United States, if Canada extends an olive branch to the U.S. on one hand, while on the other hand maintains an ambiguous attitude and leaves the back door wide open to the CCP regarding TikTok data, electric vehicle supply chains, high-tech re-export trade, critical minerals, and even the drug issue, that is a problem. Then Canada is the most dangerous security loophole in the entire North American defense system. For the United States, an ambiguous stance toward the CCP is a direct threat to American security. This farce in Canada has sounded an alarm for the whole world. Even a blood-related democratic ally like Canada cannot win the genuine trust of the United States if it does not completely cut ties with the CCP and demonstrate absolute security integrity. So, as the source of the danger itself, how could the CCP possibly deceive Washington just by saying, "I want to be friends with you," or by making a few superficial economic concessions? However, just as the external net tightens and Western containment becomes increasingly rigorous, a political earthquake triggered by extreme panic is rumbling toward Zhongnanhai from within the CCP. Recently, Shanghai entrepreneur Hu Liren obtained a tip-off through special channels that the Red Second Generation and Military Second Generation within the CCP are currently in a period of comprehensive and intense backlash against the top leader, Xi Jinping. This backlash is no longer just private grumbling or verbal complaints. It has evolved into substantive political action. It is reported that the Red Second Generation has secretly banded together. Led by Deng Pufang, the son of Deng Xiaoping, they have united with several other party heavyweights, including Liu Yuan, the son of Liu Shaoqi, to issue a political demand to the top leader with a clear deadline, requiring Xi Jinping to step down by August 30th of this year. Why would Deng Pufang be the one to step forward? Within the political spectrum of the CCP, the Deng family is the orthodox symbol of reform and opening up. Even though Xi Jinping has marginalized the group of party elders through various means over the past few years, he still harbors a subtle sense of hesitation when facing Deng Pufang, fearing that any action against him might cause collateral damage. So why would these Red Second Generation and Military Second Generation figures, who usually enjoy lives of luxury and splendor, choose to burn their bridges and step out at this very moment to force a change in leadership? The answer boils down to just two things: interests and survival. Over the past 30 years of reform and opening up, these red second-generation and military second-generation families have monopolized various highly profitable industries, such as energy, finance, and real estate, by leveraging the deep-rooted resources their parents held in the military and local governments. To put it in the language of the establishment, this is called peaceful redemption. Everyone reached a tacit understanding, using massive economic benefits in exchange for political acquiescence and stability. However, the selective anti-corruption campaigns that have taken place over the past decade or so have completely shattered this unspoken rule. Countless military second-generation and red second-generation individuals have watched helplessly as their family assets were confiscated, their confidants arrested, and they themselves were marginalized or even faced with liquidation. In private discussions, highly damaging questions have erupted from within the establishment. If corruption is a crime, then who is the biggest corrupt official of all? Hu Lurin points out that within the circles of the red second generation and military second generation, it's widely believed that Xi Jinping's family is the biggest rat within the system. There are even rumors suggesting that his family has siphoned off a massive fortune of up to 3 trillion yuan through various covert channels. Regardless of whether the figures in these rumors are entirely accurate, the rallying effect they have created within the military and among the red second generation is terrifying. They realize that if this consolidation of power and purging of dissent continues, the only outcome awaiting them all is collective imprisonment and the destruction of their families. The irreconcilable rift between the military and the top leadership began in March 2018, a turning point that altered the trajectory of Chinese history. At that time, the first session of the 13th National People's Congress was held in Beijing, with the core agenda being the constitutional amendment to abolish term limits for the president. There was a little-known detail at the time. To ensure the constitutional amendment passed, military personnel were brought directly into the meeting hall. This display of force, bordering on a military threat, compelled the more than 2,000 delegates present to obediently cast their votes in favor. In terms of traditional political logic, this was, in essence, a military coup. According to analysis, the key figure who was able to mobilize the military to enter the venue and back the move toward lifelong rule at that time was none other than Zhang Yuxia, who was then vice chairman of the Central Military Commission. As a powerful figure in the military, Zhang Yuxia is not just a second-generation military official, he is also a staunch ally and childhood friend of Xi Jinping from the early days. However, the cruelty of politics lies in the fact that yesterday's hero often becomes tomorrow's threat. Zhang Yuxia could never have imagined that the military boots he once used to help Xi Jinping trample on the law would now have that same sharp sword held to his own throat. Zhang Yuxia has also been arrested and purged. With the fall of Zhang Yuxia, the Politburo has become a mere echo chamber. However, this calm maintained by high pressure has instead gathered even more terrifying volcanic energy. The U.S. Embassy in China has recently issued frequent and strong warnings, reminding U.S. citizens in China to be aware of natural disasters and social unrest. Think about it. Is this just a coincidence? The Red Princelings are forcing a showdown, the military is in turmoil, and the U.S. is issuing warnings. All the clues seem to point toward that critical moment that's fast approaching. Perhaps something really will happen in August. China might not be far from social unrest and a regime change. Those of you who can see news from outside the Great Firewall are the fortunate ones. Here, we would like to take a moment to thank every friend who has donated to our One-Click VPN project. Last month, 108,000 people visited the One-Click VPN link, and so far, over 2,000 friends have generously extended a helping hand, allowing over 10 million visits from within China to see the real world for the first time. To thank the friends who support the One-Click VPN, starting now, donations of $150 or more will receive a hardcover copy of The Naked Communist, plus the audiobook, and donations of $300 or more will also include an ebook. Friends in China can read the ebook version for free via the One-Click VPN link. I hope more friends will help Chinese people use the One-Click VPN. We have posted the donation link below the program. Thank you all for your support. There is a question worth pondering. Even if the Red Princelings succeed in forcing a change in leadership, if a new group takes power, will the CCP be able to gain the trust of the United States and the free world? Will China really be able to get out of this predicament? If the Red Prince-Wangs succeed in forcing a change in leadership and a new group takes power, will the CCP be able to gain the trust of the United States and the free world? The answer is clearly no. Let's return to the conversation between Kenneth Lieberthal and Zhu Rongji and to the setbacks the Carney administration faced before the United States. Looking at the power rifts within Zhongnanhai today, we can see an extremely clear, progressive logic. The Carney model of simple economic concessions or appeasement for the sake of interests cannot buy trust. The Zhu Rongji or Red Princeling model of an intra-system coup, changing the medicine but not the ingredients, or simply rebranding through public relations, cannot buy trust either. So what exactly must be done for China to truly win the trust of the United States and the world? Yu believes that the answer has actually been sitting on the desk of history all along. It requires a profound reshaping of morality and human rights. And the ultimate key to untying this decades-long deadlock is simply to dismantle the CCP and rehabilitate Falun Gong. We often say that you must stand up where you fell and end where you began. On April 25, 1999, tens of thousands of Falun Gong practitioners came to the State Council Appeals Office in Beijing for a peaceful appeal. Then Premier Zhu Rongji personally came out to meet with the practitioners' representatives, listened to their demands, and properly instructed the relevant departments to handle the matter reasonably. That scene once gave the outside world a glimmer of hope for self-correction within the system and a move toward rational communication. However, just a few months later, the then top leader of the CCP, Jiang Zemin, driven by personal selfishness and fear for his authoritarian rule, forcibly launched a comprehensive suppression of the Falun Gong group. This suppression completely rewrote China's destiny. To suppress such a group of ordinary people who believe in truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance, the CCP mobilized the entire state apparatus, set its massive political and legal affairs commission system into motion, and cranked up its propaganda machine to smear and spread lies, eventually even escalating to the monstrous crime of live organ harvesting, which challenges the very bottom line of human morality. This suppression not only destroyed the nascent form of the rule of law in China, but also caused the entire CCP system to fall into complete moral bankruptcy and a human rights crisis. To cover up this persecution, the CCP has had to spend astronomical sums on stability maintenance, extending its domestic suppression tactics overseas and establishing a massive internet firewall and a cross-border infiltration network. This is precisely the fundamental starting point for the Western world's irreversible distrust of the CCP. The reason the United States and the free world don't trust the CCP is not because the Chinese people are not hardworking, nor because the Chinese economy is not developed enough, but because for a regime that can wantonly suppress its own kind-hearted citizens, deprive them of freedom of belief, and trample on basic human rights, any agreement signed is just a piece of waste paper, and any promise of peace is just a hypocritical lie. Therefore, if China wants to regain the world's trust and escape its current predicament, it must completely break free from this moral shackle. The first step is to completely abandon the Chinese Communist Party, a historical brand laden with crimes, bid farewell to one-party dictatorship, return power to the people, and establish a true system of rule of law and democracy. The second step is to openly and thoroughly rehabilitate Falun Gong and hold those who persecuted human rights accountable for their crimes. This is not only about giving long overdue justice to tens of millions of victims, but also about declaring to all of humanity that China is willing to turn over a new leaf and restore its reverence for human dignity and universal values. When China dares to face the trauma of this history, dares to tear off the label of human rights persecution, and enters a normal, civilized society of democracy, freedom, and human rights, then the trust issue between the United States and China will be easily resolved. Because true trust is never built on transactional interests, but on the adherence to shared values. Of course, it is not just Falun Gong that needs to be rehabilitated, but also the June 4th incident and so on. The wheels of history roll forward. The rumors that August 30th may just be a ripple in the transition of power, but the tide of civilization's transformation is unstoppable. I hope that everyone who cares about China's destiny can see the big picture at this critical historical turning point and choose the light. Alright, thank you all for watching today's Yu Looks at the Word. If you like our program, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with more friends around you. All right, we'll see you in the next episode.